Coxics, tailbone. So you're at your weekly yoga class, sinking into one of your favorite positions when you suddenly feel a little pressure below your spine. It doesn't hurt, but it's enough to make you feel like something is missing from your anatomy. That little pressure on your lower back that's making you feel incomplete is courtesy of your good old tailbone, also known as the coccyx. Yep, you heard that right. That tiny pointy bone is all that's left of what was once a tail. Imagine humans used to have tails. You could have been out there swatting flies away with a casual flick of the old tail, but instead it was traded for a coccyx. The universe probably thought butt pokers were a fair deal. Now, don't be fooled by its size. The coccyx may be small, but it plays a bigger role. It's like the backstage crew of your body that anchors a bunch of muscles, ligaments, and tendons, which are super important for keeping you comfortable while sitting. Without it, you'd probably end up wiggling around like a toddler on a chair trying to escape the dreaded flat butt syndrome. This tiny guy basically stops you from morphing into a human pretzel during those 3-hour meetings that feel like they'll never end. Talk about small but mighty. Wisdom teeth. Once upon a time, our ancestors were probably out there munching on raw plants and who knows what else, without a single kitchen gadget in sight. No blenders, no food processors, no handy-dandy microwaves. Just them, their teeth, and a whole lot of fibrous plants that probably tasted like a cross between cardboard and regret. However, one thing that made the whole chewing process easier was something called the wisdom teeth, the OG power chewers. These extra molars were the MVPs of the ancient dental game, chomping through all that tough, chewy nonsense like champs. If you were a caveman gnawing on raw roots, your wisdom teeth were the heroes, making sure you didn't pull a jaw muscle just trying to eat lunch. But fast forward to today, and our diets have taken a serious U-turn. Now it's all mashed potatoes, pizza, and food so soft they practically melt in your mouth. So these bad boys now are about as helpful as bringing a fork to eat soup. They're the outdated equipment of the dental world, hanging around in the back of your mouth with nothing left to grind. However, the thing with the wisdom tooth is that it shows up randomly. You could literally wake up one morning and start to feel an intense ache in your mouth, only to find out that yours decided to make an appearance. If you're one of the lucky few, you might have a jaw spacious enough to house these uninvited guests without a hitch. But for some, it's a quick and painful trip to the dentist's chair to give these unneeded teeth the boot. Sure, they may have been the secret to our ancestors' survival, but today it's a whole lot easier to just say goodbye and keep smiling, preferably without the wisdom tooth agony. Ultraviolet vision. Picture this. You're out for an evening stroll in your neighborhood, surrounded by trees and people going about their business. Everything's chill and ordinary until suddenly the branches above start glowing like neon light sticks, and the birds look like they've escaped from some disco lights show. It's as if your entire neighborhood has turned into a retro rave. This is basically what the world of ultraviolet vision, a superpower that our ancient ancestors and many animals and insects today used to possess. Take bees, for example. They're living their best lives, zooming around in what basically looks like a 24/7 party thanks to their UV vision. Back in the day, our ancient ancestors had ultraviolet vision too. Berries practically glowed from the bushes, making it easy to spot snacks even in the dim light. It was like having nature's very own blacklight to guide you to the tastiest treats. And it wasn't just for finding dinner. Predators lurking around had no chance against UV vision because any attempts at stealth were just futile. They might as well have been wearing high-vis vests. But as humans evolved, we traded in our UV vision for good old daylight vision, which gave us richer color perception and the ability to identify a rainbow of different objects and species. Now, instead of seeing glowing snacks and neon predators, we rely on glowing phone screens and food delivery apps. Big, sharp teeth. So it's the Ice Age, and it's time for dinner with your little cave family. But for the meal, there's no single utensil in sight, just you and a giant hunk of raw meat. Well, that shouldn't be a problem because you don't even need a fork and knife, and your big sharp teeth are ready to tear into it like a carnivorous champion. Basically, your prehistoric ancestors were walking, talking Swiss Army knives when it came to eating. Their teeth were the original kitchen gadgets, designed to chomp through tough plants, raw meat, and basically anything anything nature threw their way. Back in the day, early humans had large, sharp teeth that looked like they were straight out of a dino flick. They needed those bad boys to rip, shred, and chew food, whether it was a mammoth steak or some hearty roots. Dentists back then? Completely unnecessary. Your ancestors could probably open a coconut with their teeth and still have time to wrestle a saber-toothed cat afterward. Okay, maybe not, but you get the idea. But then something happened. Humans got smarter and started using tools to cut food. They figured out fire, which meant cooking food became a thing, and let's be honest, roasted veggies and tender meat are much easier on the teeth. So as evolution happened, your jaws shrank and the teeth got smaller. You essentially traded in the T-Rex look for something more Hollywood smile friendly. The appendix. The appendix is kind of like that random tool in your garage that you can't quite remember buying, don't know how to use, but you just can't bring yourself to throw away. It's this tiny finger-sized organ hanging out between your small and large intestines, waiting for a job that doesn't really exist anymore. In the olden days, when our ancestors were chomping down on whatever plants they could scavenge, the appendix was the go-to helper for digestion. It was like the little digestive assistant, making sure that all the roughage didn't cause a traffic jam in the intestine. But then humans got fancy, discovered fire, and realized that cooking food not only made it taste better, but also cut down on the whole, might this meal kill me? With softer, easier to digest diets that included meats, grains, and nicely roasted veggies, the appendix's career took a nosedive. These days, it's still hanging out, kind of like an awkward ex at a party, trying to be useful but mostly just loitering around. And while it's usually quiet, every once in a while it throws a little tantrum. If the appendix gets blocked or infected, it's like that garage tool suddenly decided to turn into a blowtorch, causing all kinds of trouble. The funny thing, though, is that if it decides to act up, doctors don't even hesitate. They just whip it out and boom, you're appendix free. Paranasal sinuses. So you wake up one morning and it feels like there's a family of tiny drummers banging away inside your head. Yep, it's sinus congestion, nature's very own head stuffed with cotton prank. But did you know that those paranasal sinuses you're cursing at were once really helpful? Well, at least back in the day. You see, way back in our evolutionary past, paranasal sinuses, the hollow air-filled spaces inside our skulls, actually served a pretty cool purpose. They helped our ancient ancestors warm and humidify the air they breathed in, because they really needed to survive the freezing climates and desert winds. Your sinuses were basically nature's heating and humidifying system before humans invented scarves and air conditioners. They also made our skulls lighter, because lugging around a heavy skull wasn't on anyone's prehistoric to-do list. Having lighter heads made it easier to walk, run, and hunt. Plus, the sinuses added a little boost to our voices, like nature's very own bass booster. So when ancient humans yelled across the savannah, they had some serious vocal oomph. Think of them as ancient megaphones. But fast forward to today, now that we live in cozy homes with climate control and only yell at customer service lines, those paranasal sinuses are more trouble than treasure. Instead of helping us, they trap mucus, bacteria, and other stuff, leaving us with the dreaded sinus infections and headaches. Palmar grasp reflexes. So, your aunt ropes you into babysitting your little cousin while she and her husband escape for a peaceful dinner. After a bit of playtime, you lay the tiny human down in his crib, and he suddenly grabs your thumb with the kind of grip you'd expect from a heavyweight champion. You're twice his size, but this kid is holding on like he's about to win a gold medal in tug of war. That impressive grip is called the palmar grasp reflex. It's a reflex that's been passed down through generation, a relic of survival instincts from way back when. In the wild days of our ancestors, newborns needed to cling tightly to their mothers for safety. This little reflex helped babies hold on like their lives depended on it, because back then, it really did. Moms would be weaving through forests, dodging predators and obstacles, with baby clinging on like the world's tiniest bodyguard. But as humans evolved, the need for this reflex to be a life-or-death skill faded away. No more clinging like little koalas while mom sprints from saber-toothed tigers. Today's babies spend more time lounging in cribs or playpens, safe from the world. The palmar grasp reflex is still present, but it's now more of a throwback feature, like an evolutionary souvenir. Gills! So, way Way back when life first started out, our distant ancestors were swimming around in the ocean, sporting full-on gills like they were born to be fish. Fast forward through a few 100 million years of evolution, and their descendants, your early vertebrate ancestors, still had gills because, well, they were still living underwater. Basically, gills were the original snorkels, letting them breathe underwater without having to come up for air every few minutes like us surface dwellers. But then evolution threw us a curveball, and some of those ancient sea creatures started exploring the world outside of water, where there was a whole lot more real estate. So they began to evolve lungs. Think of it as upgrading from a flip phone to a smartphone. Lungs were way better suited for land life, letting our ancestors stay out of water for good. Over time, this switch became permanent as vertebrates adapted to life on dry land, and those gill slits on the side of our neck evolved into other useful bits like parts of our jaw, inner ear, and throat. Thick body hair. So just imagine this. You're stepping out of your cave one chilly morning, and instead of reaching for a coat, you just shake out your luscious fur coat that practically grows out of your skin and covers your whole body. You look like a cross between a bear and a hair model for prehistoric shampoo commercials. Well, this was the reality for our ancient ancestors who rocked thick body hair as their version of winter wear. You see, back then, body hair wasn't just for fashion. It was survival because the thick fur helped early humans stay warm in cold environments. Think of it as evolution's version of a thermal blanket, except way more stylish and without the need to run a dryer cycle. It protected them from wind, rain, snow, and anything you could possibly think of. But humans don't have thick fur anymore because our strategy for the past several thousand years has been to steal the fur from other warm-looking animals to help stave off the cold. Also, humans moved to warmer climates, and with fire and cozy heated houses, our body hair took a back seat, shrinking down to the patchy look we have today. Now, most of us are left with the occasional patches of hair in random places, thanks to evolution and the eternal struggle of waxing or shaving it off. Aposable Big Toe. So, picture this. You're walking down the street, sipping your coffee, and suddenly your hands are full. You're balancing your phone, your keys, and that bagel you just bought. But this isn't a problem, all because you just casually reach down with your foot and use your big toe to pick up your bag. Sounds wild, right? Well, if you had lived a few million years ago, this toe-tastic trick would have been a normal part of life as a result of the opposable big toe, our ancient multitasking MVP. Back in the day, our ancestors spent a lot of time swinging through trees like real-life jungle gym pros, and this opposable big toe was their best friend. It helped them grip branches with their feet just as easily as we do with our hands. Imagine a monkey-like life where you could dangle from a tree while casually snacking on fruit. However, as evolution came knocking on the door, humans left the trees for the savannah, and we didn't need to climb as much anymore. Instead, walking upright became the trend. Slowly, our opposable big toe became less grip it and rip it, and more supportive sidekick for balance and walking. It transformed into the big toe we know today. Still useful, but not quite the tree-climbing powerhouse it once was. Apocrine Sweat glands. Picture this. You're at the gym, sweating buckets and wondering if you're gonna melt into a puddle. But at least you don't smell too bad, just the regular gym funk. Now imagine if your sweat wasn't just cooling you down, but acting like a personal scent billboard, broadcasting your funk to everyone within sniffing distance. Well, back in prehistoric times, the Apocrine Sweat glands did exactly this, and turned humans into walking sweaty cologne bottles. During this era, these glands, which produced thick, oily sweat, would be concentrated in areas like the armpits and groin. But instead of just cooling you down, it would also deliver messages about things like your mood, attraction, and status with its distinct smell. This thing was basically a primitive social media system. Imagine ancient humans walking around broadcasting their feelings through scent clouds, sort of like nature's version of Tinder, but with way more BO. But fast forward to today, and most of these glands have dialed it down a notch, thank goodness. While the Apocrine Sweat still exists, it only really produces an odor when you've been doing some really strenuous work without deodorant. Plus, now most of your cooling comes from the eccrine glands, which produce the watery sweat you're all too familiar with. Tonsils. Ever had your tonsils taken out and wondered, what were those things even doing in there? Well, good question, because tonsils are like the bouncers of your throat, except they're not very good at their job. They sit at the back of your mouth, acting all tough, ready to catch germs and bacteria, but when things get get serious, they're the first ones to call in sick and leave you with a swollen, sore throat. Well, way back in the day, these unreliable lumps of tissue actually served a more useful purpose. They would be the first line of defense that would spot and trap bacteria and viruses trying to sneak into our bodies through our mouths. But as humans evolved, the immune systems got stronger and tonsils became less necessary. Plus, we started developing better hygiene habits like not licking random trees, so they didn't have as much to do. Now, tonsils mostly just sit there waiting for the day they'll inevitably get inflamed or infected. And when that happens, it's usually time for them to get the boot. The funny part is that despite all their shortcomings, tonsils still hang around like that one friend who doesn't really contribute to the group project but never gets kicked out. Evolution hasn't bothered to completely get rid of them because, well, they do help a little until they don't. If you love what we do here at the Evaluator channel, then you can show your favorite creators love and support us by subscribing. Thanks. Webbed toes and fingers. Ever wonder if we could have been part mermaid? Yeah, you heard that right. Imagine how cool that would have been. You could have ditched the floaties and gone full Aquaman at the pool. But, well, evolution apparently had other plans. And here we are today with regular non-webbed digits. That's just good for waving, texting, and occasionally dropping our phones. Way back when, our early ancestors had their very own natural flippers, and these webby wonders were perfect for swimming through rivers, lakes, and other watery landscapes where catching dinner required more than just a fishing rod and a gone fishing hat. However, evolution made an executive decision that walking upright on land was a better long-term investment, so the webbing between our fingers and toes slowly started to fade away as humans traded swimming for sprinting. Apparently, running away from saber-toothed tigers was more important than perfecting the butterfly stroke. It's all about priorities, people. Although today, some people are still born with partial webbing, it's nothing compared to the full-on flipper action we once had.